with great honor that I'm up here speaking in my role. I just want to welcome all of our traditional chiefs, elders, our chiefs and delegates, youth, and our guests and staff to this full board meeting. I just want to take a minute and recognize some of the people that I work closely with on a daily basis. And if we can have all the TCC staff stand up in the room, please, and be recognized. Some people wonder why we always have our staff in the room or why I take so many staff with me to the communities that I travel. It's because every day, many of them are making decisions on your behalf, and they need to hear your voice. And I always think it's better that they hear it directly from you and not through me. And so that gives it the strength that I need it to have. So once again, to all the TCC staff, you're greatly appreciated for the work that you do for our tribes and our tribal members. So when I look at this and I think about our theme, Chigwitsin, living our values in a changing world, why was that theme selected this year? Chigwitsin, living our values in a changing world. When I think about the challenges that we have faced and we're facing, it's a struggle to keep our way of life going. At every corner that we are coming to, every Y in the path, there's a new challenge or an old challenge in resurfacing. It becomes really hard when you think about some of the challenges, especially for those ones that we have already won, now that we're going back. You heard reports yesterday that specifically talked about a couple of them, whether it's the ICWA case, whether it's land into trust. Those things have been fought and won, and now we're taking a step back. But it's no different than our leaders of our past. They had to face similar challenges. But then I think about Chigwitsin, and I think about what Chief Luke Titus said yesterday. He gave a really great definition of Chigwitsin. We heard our late traditional chief, Peter John, talk about Chigwitsin, talk about the love. And if you watch his video, what he says is about giving all you have. He compares it when people are doing memorial potlatch, because they give it all. When you do it right. That's the message that we're working towards. I think about our chief, Luke Titus. He made it very clear. It's not Valentine love we're talking about here. It's much deeper. He says it means the encompassing, powerful love, a deep love that you have for your people, your heritage, your village, your hunting and fishing, and so on. It's putting your whole heart into something. So when we look at it, and we look at our values, and we look at the challenges in front of us, we don't get to do it in half measures. We don't get to take a little step. We don't get to back up. We have to go forward. Our ancestors never backed up. They always went forward. That was why we selected the theme that we did. What drives our organization is our mission, and that's the Tanana Chiefs Conference provides a unified voice in advancing sovereign tribal governments through the promotion of physical and mental wellness, education, socioeconomic development, and culture of the interior Alaska Native people. That drives our direction when it comes to our work. All towards a healthy, strong, unified voice. Last November, we came together, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about Chigwitsin, because what our delegates said in that special convention was that we want you to use and adapt the spirit of Chigwitsin throughout your organization. At the same time, they said, we authorize you to use the guiding principle. Accessible and trusted world-class services provided with unconditional love, compassion, dignity, and respect. Most importantly, what we were being said is, hear me. Hear me. When our leadership comes to us and they say something, they don't expect it to bounce off the ears. They want us to hear them. When our people walk into the services that we provide, they don't want to just be talked to. They want to be heard. Whether you're sitting in front of a doctor with all of his degrees, or her degrees, all her experience, the most important voice in that room is the person we're serving. It doesn't matter if it's in my office. The most important person in that room is the person I'm talking to. Hear me is an important value of our guiding principle. And when we look at it, it's just not on an external basis that we're looking at it. It's just not what we're doing outside of Tanana Chiefs. We have to practice it inside too. And part of that practicing is making sure that when I'm either talking with staff or we're trying to make sure programs are running smoothly, that we adapt this same value. When people come in my office, there's a few things, whether they're staff or whether they're people, our tribal leadership, our tribal members. I need to make sure that they had access to me. I need to make sure that when they leave, they had a positive experience and that it was done in a good way. It doesn't always mean that it's going to be the conversation they wanted or the decision that they necessarily wanted, but it does have to be done in a good way. I want to share an experience with you in how I've already been able to use this guiding principle when we're looking at concerns that are being brought up by tribal members. Recently, I received a call from a person, and she indicated that she just got off the phone with the central scheduler, and she didn't like the conversation. And so I called down to our patient advocate, and the question that I have is, can you please check into this case and see how they applied Chigwitsin, see how they applied our guiding principle. And when the report came back, it was very clear what had happened in that exchange. It was very clear that Chiguitsin wasn't applied, or our guiding principles. But what was also clear was what we needed to do to correct it, to make sure it was incorporated. One of the things that I'm really satisfied about is how our staff are already thinking about throughout the organization how we can use it. And really, who's holding back our staff right now is administration, because we weren't ready to roll it out so that it could be standardized throughout our organization, and we want to make sure that our messaging is the same. But as we move forward with this, this is going to be an important principle that we adapt. As we look at our strategic plan, everything that drives us is this. Now, we can talk about the day-to-day services. We do that all the time. This is usually on top of our day-to-day services. But before I start there, I want to recognize Paul Sherry. I don't know if Paul Sherry's in the room. I'm not seeing him, but I do want to recognize him because he's helped us put together the strategic plan. And it has helped propel us to where we're currently at. We're not stopped yet. We still got to move forward. We still have to go. But I look at a strategic plan like this. If we don't know where we're going to never get there. And so it's important for every program, division, department, our organization is working towards this common goals. Before I move any further right now, I'd just like to show you a video on some of the 2018-2019 accomplishments. Please. That work was accomplished through your direction to us and by our staff working very hard to achieve those type of outcomes. Now, the direction we receive starts with you, our delegates, our chiefs, our 42 members. Without your direction to us, we won't be in alignment, and so it's very important that we do everything we can to make sure that the direction happens. It's carried out with the thoughtfulness of a very, very, what am I trying to say here? When I'm looking at our executive board and how engaged they are throughout our process. Not only do they help give us direction through the guidance that they're seeing and from your voice, the other thing is that they're making sure that they're very engaged in a lot of other areas. In our strategic planning process, they are engaged at every level. And I just want you to know that you have a strong executive board. I also like to take this moment and congratulate Chief Nancy James and Chief Frank Thompson for their re-election. Congratulations. For your executive board, you have Peter Demosky, our elder advisor. Julie Robert Heislip, Tanana Vice President. Jerry Isaac, our Secretary Treasurer. Eugene Paul, Lower Yukon. Nick Alexi, Upper Kuskokwim. Chai, Upper Tanana. Carl Burgett, Yukon Kayakuk. Jolie Murley, Youth Advisor. Dang, I wish somebody had hollered like that for me. Victor Joseph. All right. All right. So then, of course, we have Nancy James with the Yukon Flats. And Frank Thompson, Tanana. We recently done and completed a survey that really works towards guiding us in our strategic planning. When we look at the service needs, housing was the #1 factor that everybody said. There's only a couple communities that it wasn't their top priority. But what's so significant about this, housing scored higher than employment and training, public safety and substance abuse, and patient travel combined. That's how big. That was why one of the reasons we put the housing panel on yesterday, because we really need to move forward and address this housing shortage that we have. You've seen the number of homes that we need in our region just to meet the needs of today. That's not about tomorrow, and that's not about existing structure. It's just the new housing. We have a lot of existing structure that needs some renovation too. And so those are areas that we have to be addressing. What I'm really hoping for is to really work with Senator Murkowski on that housing summit. Ideally, I would like to have it in the interior, but when it comes down to it, what's really most important to me is we have the summit with the right people in that room, so that we could be looking at how do we really address it. And one thing that Chief Nancy James always brings up is how do we work together? We have our resources are not as much as they used to, so how do we bring them all together to maximize the needs of our people? So just some of the work your executive board committee does is they get out there and they do a lot of advocacy, and this is our advocacy committee. And just know that when we look at this group of people, that they're in there and they're meeting with Representative Sakuski, I can't pronounce her name, and Representative Neil Foster, fighting for you, advocating on your behalf and voicing their concern about the governor's budget. And it was really great, and it was very powerful when they were on the floor. Now, yesterday, it was really good to hear that the president signed off on the act that authorizes the Alaska Native Veterans allotment. There's been a lot of work that has been done to get this passed. And it hasn't been easy. Since I've been on as the chief chairman, this has been a constant conversation by us, by your TCC staff, by your executive board, by AFN, by a lot of other people working collaboratively together to put this as the main issue. It's only right that our veterans of a past war get treated equally and fairly. And it's only right that their descendants are able to have this land transferred to them if those veterans are no longer here. So for all of you that are either a veteran in this room, or a descendant of a veteran, or family of a veteran, please stand up and be recognized. Please stand up. This work was done for you. Before I move forward in this discussion, there's a lot of concerns about public safety, but I want to show you a video, and we'll let that video lead the discussion, please.
There were no VPSOs when I was a kid. There were no cops or anything. The only cops that I ever seen were city police and state troopers, and that was very, very rare to see them.
Village public safety officer is very essential to our communities. They're vital. Leaders come and express to me that when there's VPSO in their communities, the community changes for the better. Just simply having law enforcement there.
I know they're a big help just by walking into the community hall, just to see that person, we know that we're protected and watched over.
You have to, have the respect and the support of the elders and the community. It's hard sometimes. It's really hard because you're doing what nobody else wants to do.
It would really be easy to say, they provide law enforcement, but they provide so much more than that. They're about becoming engaged within the community, being part of the community. That's what a VPSO can bring to a community, a sense of safety and security.
I think we need more positive programs for our VPSO and let them know that we appreciate them. And I think our villages need to do that too. What can you do to uplift your VPSO? And how can we help this young person to want to be in that position?
So if we can build our law enforcement program to a point where we're actually able to work with our communities, we're going to have a lot more positive outcomes. And working with our communities, that's powerful. That's what we're working towards.
Public safety is a major concern to all of us. And it's a matter of really seeing what's in front of us. We know when there's a lack of public safety and that there's a carnival in town. People like bringing the goods to the community, the goods that are going to hurt, the drugs and alcohol. I have seen and heard the stories where our chiefs, even P.J. Simon and back, stood in front and took away the alcohol and drugs. I've seen where Huslia, Carl Burgett, Speedy Sam went out to the plains, checked bags. I heard so many other stories where our chiefs, our council members, are confronting the drug dealers that are hurting our young and putting themselves at risk. You heard the story the other day when Tanana was the tribal chiefs and the tribal courts were having to make a decision, and the threats that they received, and then the time it took for a response from the state troopers. The sad thing is today is when you're having an incident happen in your community, it's happening now. It's not happening 2 hours from now. It's going on now. We need to figure out a better solution so that we can make sure that public safety is within our communities. I'm very concerned with the new commissioner's position regarding the VPSO program. And we're working closely with our other partners, the VPSO contractors in Juneau, lobbying to make sure that we protect this very important program. Her position is she would like to see something else being done. My concern is, well, if you want to see something else being done, work with us, work with our tribes, so we can build a system that would really work. Give us the authority to provide public safety within our communities. We will know how to do it. So we're looking at the possibility of compacting to take on that services so we can design it the way we see it's needed to be designed without the interference of the state of Alaska. So that becomes really important when we're looking at it. The bottom line is you, your children, your grandchildren, my children, our people have a right to feel safe wherever we're at. You know, I think about a VPSO officer, and I think about a story I just heard yesterday. Actually, I heard it a while back between a TPO and his best friend, where the TPO, or the tribal police officer, had to engage his best friend. And that story could have ended very negatively. And if you've been a VPSO in this program, you know how that feels. When you're having to look at your best friend, your brother, your sister, your dad maybe, uncle, aunt, people you grew up with, and having to take care of an issue, or if that individual broke a law, to arrest them. We know what that does to those relationships. But because of the two people's closeness, what they were able to do was respect each other's position, and it was done in such a good way that they're still friends today. That's the power that you can have when you're in a VPSO, when you're a VPSO or a TPO within a community. It doesn't have to be negative, even in the worst case scenarios. It could be turned around into a positive solution, as these two strong men have done. We've seen a little bit about the K-9 area. We still have a lot of concerns with the transportation of drugs out into our communities and all of our communities. Unfortunately, the canine dog that we supported, the one thing that was told to me is that Nija is not good in big crowds. And so where we need her the most when we're having our celebrations is out there, and that's where we want her. And so when we have our carnivals and stuff, she doesn't work good in that environment. She works better alone and on to the side, and so we have to figure out another solution. And I'd really like to see us having a solution with our, a solution where we have control of a canine with a tribal police officer. I think that would be a better solution in working in collaboration with the state troopers. Just so you know that when we're looking at the Secretary of Tribal Advisory Group Committee, and this is a really important national one, that the career staff indicated that their visit to Alaska was the best in the history of HHS. That's how powerful it is. So I just want to thank the villages of Alacacat, Alatna, Hughes, Eagle, Tok, Nenana, Tanana, and Old Minto for participating in this visit and making sure that they had. So water and sewer projects, we're still working that, and that was one of the big issues that we were addressing with the STAC. Yesterday, we heard Senator Solomon say that the water and sewer funding is still a priority for him. This is a portable alternative sanitation system, also known as the PASS, and we put it in a few communities, Chalkitzik, Alatna, and Alacacan, and it's a pilot project, and we're waiting to see the results. We're hearing pretty good results, but I do know that one of the families, I think Pollock and Julia Simons, theirs are having some issues, and we're going to be working to address that. But they seem to be working, and when I was talking to Julia, she indicated that she would really like to see it fixed. And so we're going to be addressing that, and we need to get some of those reviews that are moving on. Also, too, right now, they did a lot of soil samples long time ago. So when we're looking at the water and sewer, we're going to look at those soil samples. We need to get another analysis because the soil samples have changed. I just really want to take a minute and thank Will Mail and Amber for all the work that they've done to put together the Tribal Unity Gathering. That was a group of about 52 tribes that showed up at the last gathering, and about 13 different organizations. One of the areas that when we started thinking about the Tribal Unity Gathering is how do we bring all of our tribes together, and how do we let the tribes make the decisions here in Alaska and take those goals on a national level. A major concern we have is that TIBIC, when we look at the Alaska representatives, which there's 2, they're being selected by the BIA director. I thought that was totally inappropriate. He's selecting our representatives to go to DC and talk to our behalf. You didn't have a choice in that. What this does is going to help gather all of our tribes together so you can put that choice in. And so we just recently had a meeting with the BIA director, and that was an indication that we shared with him, is that the tribes want to have the right to select their representatives that are going to be talking about the BIA budget that's impacting us. And so I think that's really good. And once again, Will, thank you for all the work. Amber, much appreciated. Now, going back just a little bit to public safety, I asked the Cody Air family if they're in the room. Are they in the room today? I thought I was going to be expecting him here today. I don't know if you all heard about this, but we've been really concerned, and I just want to be addressing this, and I'm doing it in the best way I can. Cody Air was shot by police officers in an altercation, and my concerns are this. The shootings that were involved with law enforcement most recently, and I'm not saying that they weren't all valid, and I'm not saying that. I don't like them. I think our law enforcement, instead of shooting individuals, but I also know that they need to protect themselves too, and I needs to be able to protect themselves. I think we all agree with that. But we also want them to be thinking twice before they use their firearm. That's what we want. Here's the concern. Was Cody, his mom called him about her son. The police responded. He would just be arrested. We did know that he had a firearm, and he had a .22 revolver. As he went through, it was the response that really concerned me, because he was shot 23 times. The family's been working on this case, and one of the things that they're trying about, it's about how can we change the system. First of all, is when a shooting happens by law enforcement, they investigate themselves. And when they do that, I wonder how fair that investigation. If you think about everything that we do, we're not allowed to invest, but law enforcement is able to. And so they ask very clearly, for when law enforcement are involved in a shooting outside of themselves, this process. And I think that would be very fair. To a treatment advocacy group, this is one of the concerns I have, because when I look at what was the situation that was presenting and the mom having concerns, we understand that nationally, people with untreated mental illness and health issues are 16 times more likely to be killed by law enforcement. Now, that's not my stat. That's a stat by the treatment advocacy group. That's what they're saying. 16 times more likely. Then when I look at, and one of the things they're asking for is a crisis intervention training, or team. It's not a training, it's a team, to be established. And what's so significant about this? That team also has with it a health professional or a mental health specialist on that team, so that they could be talking to this. And it's a model that has been put on by Memphis law enforcement, and they've established it, and it works fairly well for them. It reduced that number. And so the two asks from the Codier family is, one, we need to make sure that if our law enforcement is involved in a shooting, that they're being investigated by a source outside of themselves. Two, that they look at adapting a crisis intervention team that would help lower that. And I think those are two really fair asks, because we're all concerned about the number of Native people that have been involved in law enforcement shootings. And I want to also be very sensitive here. And if there's news people, I'm not saying that they're bad people. What I'm saying is that we have our concerns. We know that they need to protect themselves. But we also want to make sure that our people are treated fairly as well in these. And there's been situations where they have been engaged, and where it's been handled really well. But there's also been those situations when it's been a non-Native and a Native folk, it has been handled differently, and we want to make sure that that's also part of the sensitivity process that our people, the law enforcement, is learning about. Saying that, I want to say this. I respect law enforcement, and we all need to. We've been asking for it, and we've been needing it. Now, here's something that's really going to be a major concern for us as we move forward, is the ceremonial moose, our moose for our potlatches and memorials. One of the things that recently, last June, Chief McManus, you were notified by Alaska Fish and Game, and you were told that there's no longer cow moose available in that area for a potlatch moose, correct? Yes. Okay. Now, once again, this was a case that we already have won, and I really thank the people that were involved in the earlier case as we look at that whole case that moved in front of us. But one of the things that they're telling us, Fish and Game is saying, that in 20B, 20C, 20F, and 25C, I was trying to get you a map of the units here, and if you look at it, in the top right corner is 25C, and it kind of follows that whole road all the way to Circle. If you look at 20B in the Minto Flats area, that area has been closed, and 25C, that's just the south side of the Tanana River starting at Nenana. Well, it really starts at the Nenana River, and it goes towards the west. If you look at where it says Minto, right just to the left of your screen, that's 20F. And that goes all the way to Tanana. Now, that's a big area to say, and that covers a lot of our communities if you think about it. It's Nenana, it's Circle, it's Minto, it's Manly, and potentially Tanana, who rely on this area to be able to go after ceremonial moose. My concern is this. If you look at some of the areas, they've done a lot of, they have been authorizing a lot more taking of cows, especially in the Minto Flats, where they have really reduced the cows in that area. And so when they're establishing the quota, my other concern is that they're not looking at and counting on the ceremonial or the potlatch moose. One of the things that they keep on saying for is that we don't have a good counter, so when we go after our permits being authorized, people are not reporting as soon as they take a cow moose for a potlatch. But that's fairly simple, right? You gave out 60 permits, you can assume 60 moose were taken. And they have some other factors that they can do, and so it doesn't take a genius to figure out the math. My concern is that they are violating the law, and we want to make sure that we protect our rights with this. Now, there's a lot going on within the BLM and land process, and I'm going to have to speed up a little bit, but really here, there's two regional management plans that are put together. You have the Bering Sea, and that report just came out, and it's going to impact the gas units. Now, one of the good things that we heard was Steve Wachowski. He came in, and he's the senior advisor to the Secretary of Alaska, and he met with all of you. And he indicated that we're going to be able to have the cooperative agency status for any tribe that wants to be involved in the central Yukon or the Bering Sea, which is really good. But the draft EIS has already came out in the Bering Sea, and that leaves us right now with 89 days to review that and respond. The good thing is that you all get to be at the table. The bad thing is that you weren't involved in it in the beginning. Now, when we look at the central Yukon, basically, if you think about that, Rampart to Caltag, all the way up to Allakaket, and all those communities in between there, that has a different area, and we're expecting the draft to come out, the EIS draft to come out in May, and so you're going to be needing to really focus in on that portion of it, but the great thing is that you have that cooperative agency status. Again, another area that's really important here is that you're going to need to get schooled up really quickly, and we agreed that we would help coordinate a meeting for both the Lower Yukon and for the tribes within the Central Yukon Regional Management Plan. Now, there's other projects that they've been working on, and I'll just go through them really quickly. You have the Ambler Road, and they're looking at road options. And I think that's really good, but they're in the process of the EIS right now, and it's going to continue to move. And so it's really great to hear Allakaket is part of the cooperative agency. Hughes is. I don't know if Alatna is. Alatna part of that cooperative agency on the Ambler Road? No. And I didn't think so. So only 2 of the tribes that requested cooperative agency status really received it. And there's more tribes that are concerned. Carl, Chief Forget, I know you are, and Chief Sam, I know you are, and there's other tribes that have requested that too. Steve said he was going to look into it. On the Donlin mine, that's another area of major concern, and we really need to be thinking about that for the Upper Kuskokwim area, because you have you're finalized your EIS, and there was environmental factors that you should be very concerned with within that. And so one of the areas that we need to be looking at is how you're going to be able to respond to it, but also there's opportunity for you to try to get in some contractual agreements for the monitoring thereafter. And that goes the same with ANWR, as we're looking at ANWR, and ANWR is a very major concern. And, you know, there's been a lot of work, and the people that have been working on to protect their heritage, the fight against the movement and the development of ANWR need to be stand up and recognized. So Charlene, can you stand up? Because this is a major commitment. There's people in back, when I think about everybody engaged in the ANWR fight, there's more people than you. Just come on, everybody that's participated in the ANWR discussion, stand up a little bit here, be recognized. And so this is a big issue, and they need to be had. I've said in meetings, and I spoke at meetings where I felt attacked by our delegation because I was opposing the development of ANWR. I said in a meeting with the Secretary Jewell, with all of our Alaska delegation, with all the officials from Arctic Slope, and said, we oppose any development in ANWR. The other thing I said was, if it came to protecting your subsistence way of life, and I was talking to the leadership in Barrow, I indicated to them, we would stand by your side in solidarity. In fact, when they were fighting to make sure that they could still hunt their whales, we were there, and we would always be there. What we were asking was the same consideration on our behalf for the caribou and the animals we depend on. So when you look at that, we really have to find a balance there and move forward. And so their EIS is out now, the draft. And Charlene, you've been doing a lot of work as part of this, and I really appreciate all the effort that you've done. And this is for the exploration portion of it, or the seismic part of it. And so right now, there's a couple things that need to be being done as this moving forward. This is the time where the contractors that are going to be possible, that those procedures are going to be drafted up. That's going to be a very big piece. And so those emergency factors need to be considered. I think I'm stating that correctly. But there's also times, even in your opposition, you need to make sure that you might be able to establish and coordinate a monitoring status. And so where you have that opportunity to monitor that. The one concern that I have with this whole development of that EIS was that it was fast-tracked, as Steve was indicating yesterday. And you're trying to do work in 6 months that should have took a year to 2 years, or longer if necessary. And one of the areas that I didn't see a lot of was the traditional and historical knowledge. One of the things that I didn't see a lot was with the coordination in the other area when we think about the development. And so those are areas that we had concerns with, and just areas that we wanted to move on with. But there's a lot going on in this area. I encourage you to stay engaged. Now, people have been talking to us and passed a resolution here a few years ago, and they talked about we want to be able to take care of our elders closer to home. And just recently, I started going on trips, and I really want to thank Agnes Sweetser for allowing us to go to Galena and review her the program that she manages, their elder assisted living facility. And we were able to travel there with the Fort Yukon leadership. We asked to have another visit with her with the full Yukon Flats leadership. And then we're also planning to go down there with the Upper Tanana as we're moving to meet that. On a cultural wellness, there's 9 camps. There was 9 camps last year, and 781 total participants. What I want to say here is that this is where we talk to a lot of our kids. And so there was a concern brought up by Daisy yesterday, how are we meeting with the kids? This is one of the ways that we're talking to the kids about the concerns and the needs to follow the law. And so we have an HR person that goes right out to there. Now, you also talked about education and how we're getting in the schools. That's a little bit more challenging and difficult because sometimes the schools don't want to be interrupted, but we are trying to get in there and and we're trying to coordinate that more and more as it moves forward. So I just wanted to share that piece with you. Now, there are some communities that need to still set their dates, and it's going to get really difficult as we're trying to pick it. And so if you see your tribal's name up here, please look at setting that date, because we want to make sure that you are able to get the assistance you want, and we want to make sure that those camps are available. Just don't think they have to be camps out in the woods. These could be camps in your community, and there's been a lot of successful camps. And we can, I know, and there's just been good opportunity. The nice thing about this infuses your community with about $55,000 to help support this. And I think that goes a long ways in having a good turnout in your sub-regional camps. We already know about the coloring book. It's a book that was put together, and once again, Communications did a really good job. And, you know, of all the Alaskan animals in 10 different languages of a region. And now, many people think that our region is only Athabascan. It's not. We have Inupiaq too. And so we wanted to make sure that they were recognized as part of our region and that their language is part of this book as well. Legacy of our elders. How many people were here last night and seen that? Huh? Come on. That was a good experience. We had over 400 people. Do we got a trailer we can show really quickly? Please start that up.
In those days, we had canned milk and pepper, so we learned how to spell reliance and pet.
My brother would make little hooks for us out of pins or something. He was always excited to catch a fish.
And that's how I went from Circle to Mount Edgecombe. What a different world.
I don't know what to do, you know, around the village. So I was thinking, I'm going to try the army just for the heck of it.
By that time, I was fully immersed into what I call my political life.
I remember she was watering the garden, and I was there watching her. There was a little bear, and I went into the garden. So she ran out there with a broom, chasing that guy. Not afraid.
I asked him, Dad, who you talk to when you go to bed? And he say, Sna, that means my child, there isn't just us here on this earth. He said, there's a higher power.
I never knew that big people could cry until my dad was crying. It was just the saddest sound. And our little dog, we had a little dog, it would just cry too.
You have to fight for your existence sometimes. I have feelings, I have needs, and I have wants. And who do you think is going to make all that possible?
They sent me to Dead Horse. The people, those guys would look at me and they said, "You're an oiler?" I said, "Yes."
They have mass dance. Cause they're full. Yeah, I holler, hey, you know, to welcome them. Yeah.
You were born with the Spirit. It's in you. And that Spirit, when it wakes up, it lets you know many things. That is what I give to my grandchildren.
This was just a great showing last night, and we watched 3 videos. And, I think one of the most important thing as these Legacy of Elders videos and interviews have been happening, since we recorded them, 5 of the elders have passed away, 2 of them just this year. And so it's more important than ever that we start recording more and more of these stories for our younger people as we move forward. Once again, communications, great job. As we look at the financial management, I'm just going to say this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this area. Brian's going to go over this in detail. But, really when I'm looking at it, we just experienced the longest shutdown, government shutdown in history. What was so cool about it was if any of you needed it, we would have been able to stand up to that plate and help you out. But none of our tribes needed help because of their own ability to manage their programs, and they did really well. I really want to thank the self-governance staff, and we need to give them a hand because they were checking on you weekly. Just a couple things I do want you to know about, and because I don't want Brian to be bragging about himself, and I need to brag about the accounting team too. Here's what it is. In the last 4 years, operating over 200 and some grants, moving between 400 different types of programs, we only had 1 finding in the last 4 years. I don't know if you know how big that actually is. And we came from where we were having 23 to 26, Jerry, back in the day that when we start working on this, right? So this is me patting the accounting guys on the back and ladies and the whole accounting team. Brian, good job. Not only this is that we're always looking at how can we save the company money, and for one, as we looked at the possibility of expansion, one of our goals in the past was how do we get a bond rating? I don't know if you know, but when we built the last clinic, we thought we were going to get a AA rating. We didn't because they'd never experienced anybody like us, and so we ended up having to pay a lot higher interest rates than we originally thought we would. I think we went from that time probably about 4% to almost 8%, right? Through refinancing process that we went through a couple years ago, we saved just about, how many millions, Brian? 67 million. So that's one way that we're trying to save our tribes money. In addition to this, it's anticipated because of our rating that we just received, and once again, good job to Brian and Ben, it'll save us just right under $10 million, and that's significant when we're talking about what the challenges, financial challenges we are in today. Now, because of our financial wealth and our health, we've been able to distribute unrestricted funds to our tribes, and you all been using it in a really good way. Just giving you a couple of examples, Hughes, they put together and created a self-help housing program, and I thought this was really great. And they used the amount of funds that were spent, about $91,000. They employed 7 people, and they assisted 3 families. And this is the type of benefit that this money gets to bring. In Tetlin, they renovated their community buildings in the clinic hall, Old Hall, and Washateria. They spent the $100,000. They employed 6 people, and the number of tribal members assisted was 130. And, this is just a small example of what's happening. Now, with the 50K distribution that was just authorized by our executive board, it was this, is that 19 tribes have received that 45,000. That means 18 tribes haven't, okay? And so if you're one of the tribes that haven't requested this drawdown, please do so. It's the money that we're trying to get you, and you can see the type of programs that people are using to move through it. Everybody knows this lady or is starting to know her or heard about her, and she's just a dynamic lady, Jennifer Babcock, and she's the new village support accountant. And one of the great things about this lady is the amount of the willingness that she has to travel out to your communities to help you with your books. And she's been doing a really good job, and she's been, the more she's doing, the more that she's being called, and we're trying to figure out a system and how we can be adding to her. Here's a question that I have for you. A couple years now, you've been hearing me say, if we could save you some money, would you be willing for us to stand up a for-cost accounting agency that would help you do your books? Now, if you consider this, one of the concerns that we hear all the time from the BIA is when people are starting to do their 638 programs, which is good, that's a good thing, is that they're having to start to pay contractors, and a lot of their money's going to contractual services. So my question is, if we could stand up a for-cost accounting agency for you on your behalf, would you be willing to pay a portion of that through your 638? Now, here's why I'm asking that. If you think about this, I know a village, I was looking at some numbers the other day, that one village is paying about $9,000 a month. $9,000 a month for an accounting firm. Now, Ben, I think what we were talking about here was it depends on the level of services that they're asking for the accounting agency to do. And what we know, and if you just equate that number out, right, and say, okay, I'm just going to round up to make it easy. I'm just going to say 10,000, that's going to be 120,000. That's for one community. That's their cost. What it costs us to employ an accountant that can take on 9 to 10 communities, we were saying about 120,000, 130,000, so it kind of zeroes out. But if you put a few more tribes in there, because this accountant can serve anywhere from, I'm just going to go 8 to 12 communities, depending on their workload, you can see how that cost can dramatically go down. And so that's why I'm asking this question. If you're interested in, would you like us to look at some of these and have that discussions? And I'd just like to see some hands if you are. Would you be interested in us looking at something like that to save you some monies from the delegates? Okay. So we'll be looking at that. We'll be having some more discussions and we'll work with Brian and Ben to see how this might work. Okay, I'm going to move on from here. Now, okay, we're looking at this. There's a couple things. I'm going to talk about the state budget here, and I'm going to try to hopefully make one of our employees a little bit more satisfied with the statement I made the other day. The person had some concerns about what I said about school closure. And if you look at it, and there's a report that I received, and it's drafted by, it's about what the governor's proposed budget could do to the education system. In it, and indicated, it never said in it that there's going to be school closures. Never did. But if you look at the cumulative factor to all the issues, you can't say there won't be. And I think that's an important statement. Because let me give you an example. If you reduce a significant number of teachers' positions, that's going to close the school. I'm pretty well sold on that part. If you look at who has the authority to close schools, it's not necessarily superintendents, it's the governing body. And so they're going to have to make decisions on where these cuts are going to come from. And it's dependent on how that body is established, that's going to talk about that. If they raise the number of students in our schools that are required for our schools before closing, and change it from 10 to something a little bit higher, automatically 13 schools are down in our region. When I look at taking a position or two away from some of those communities, they're not going to be able to afford that. The student count's got to go down or could go down. You take out PCE and you sweep that into the general fund, it's going to make cost of living more harder and more people are going to be leaving the community. And so more people leaving the community means ultimately that the school population is going to go down, could have more closures. So when I look at over time, the cumulative factor, I think the possibility of a number of schools being shut down are there. And that's where I'm standing on my statement. You better with that one? Okay, we're better with that one, thank you. But in the report, it didn't indicate any. I want to go back here. We already heard about the state budget. I'm not going to talk much about that. Federal budget. I think this becomes really important. You heard about the budget and the president's report, proposed budget. But one of the things that I want you to know is that the FY19 budget had increases to both IHS and DOI. The bill included money for rural broadband, supplement nutritional assistance program, higher energy cost, a slight increase for clean and safe water, and IHS sanitation facilities. Now, what we're looking at from the proposed budget, and you heard Senator Murkowski yesterday, she said don't get too excited. And there are some cuts that they're indicating. Medicaid, $200 billion over 10 years, DOI, 14%. But what we've seen in that, and we're looking at the DOI budget, IHS had a slight increase, but I don't know what that increase looked like. Total 12.5, and education had a 10% decrease. And so we're going to be looking at that. Of course, I'm not too worried about it, but because we need to work with the House and Senate. Facilities. Just want to show you some renovations. You know, a couple years ago, we made a decision to transition patient hostel to our elder facility and then the Willow House. But we want to make sure when we're bringing people to town, we're going to be working with, we want our people to come into a place where they can stay that is modern, refreshing, and they don't need to be in a dreary, dark place. And I think this becomes really important. This is the room that we're looking at renovating in the Willow House. That's the palliative room. And I think that becomes really important. And, you know, as people are at end of life, we want to make sure that they're able to rest in comfort and there's the ability for somebody to stay with them in there. This is a guest room that it'll look like, and you can see what we're trying to get to. And a layout of our common area or the kitchen. And so we want to make sure that people have a common area. Just kind of looking at that, you can see this would be a much better situation for our people coming in for medical care and moving forward. Now, we've been trying to get a clinic built in Manly and Evansville as we've been working around the region. This is a model of what we're looking at. It's 1,000 square feet, and this is the floor layout. And so you start looking at that, and this is the one that we both, all three of us agreed that this would be the best model to work on. Healy Lake Clinic, and when I'm looking at the Healy Lake, I think this is an important clinic. This is not the best picture we had, but we've been working on that clinic. We need to wrap that up, and it's been a long project, but we've been having some challenges there, but we're going to keep on moving. The Circle Clinic was exciting. I wasn't able to make the opening house, and so you know what I had to do, Jessica? I had to sneak down there by myself, take a drive with my grandkids, and go look at your clinic, which I wasn't able to walk inside. So I'm just letting you know. But I did it. On the other side is the new Tok sub-regional clinic, and this is what we're looking at when we're looking at renderings and what we're seeing. We're about at 15,600 square feet, 800 square feet, so 15.8. And this is the floor plan. And if you look at it, it's a multi-purpose facility. In the green there, it has the behavior health. In the, I don't know what you want to call that, one color there on the left, upper left is the dental. The light blue is the trauma area and the clinical rooms, and then we have a pharmacy. And I think it's a fairly good layout once we're looking at how do we meet their needs. The Chief Andrew Isaac expansion is going to be huge. We're still looking at that. We're still moving forward, even with the concerns that we're seeing. One of the things that I want to assure you is, as we're moving forward, we're not going to jump into anything foolishly. We're watching our budget. We're looking at what's being said, and we'll respond accordingly. If we feel like that we can't manage this, then of course we'll stop the project if we need to. But I'm concerned with stopping the project. You heard yesterday that we want to be able to keep people home during certain care. Part of that expansion is to help keep people home. And so when we start looking at oncology services and how we coordinate that, are being able to do more and more here. And so that expansion process is going to be very huge. What we're going to do is try to get that expanded and have it all ready to go. So if you all so choose to, at the end of, by the time I'm done with my term in March, then it'd be all ready to go and still could be being put up at that time. And so that's what I'm looking at, is trying to conclude. Technology-wise, there are some questions around technology, but I just want you to know that we installed the 23 generators that we wanted to in our clinics. Here's something that that's really good. Now, if you can look up in that left corner where you see Evansville, what we want to have it do is connect to the quintillion line, or the fiber. That's where the red line is there, the road. And then you'll see a little green line kind of going over to the Yukon Flats. What this would do for us, if we can connect to the quintillion line, is that from Fairbanks, Nenana, all the way around to Caltech, up to Evansville, we will have a complete loop. Now, what is so dynamic about that loop is this: if we have a break in Galena, it won't stop the services from Galena on. Currently, right now, if we have a break in Galena, it stops our services and we have to go to satellite. And so what we're hoping for is that loop, which would mean if it broke in Galena, we could go the other way and have just as fast service. And so this is going to be beneficial. For the Yukon Flats, we're also hoping that we're going to be able to get us move forward with microwave moving down, utilizing that quintillion line. And so there's some good possibilities in our future when we're looking at that. Solar panels. This is an exciting project that we're looking at and working with Hughes with, and Wilmer and I've had some discussions. We got a pilot project that we're going to partner with them on and make a little bit of investment. And that's so that we can understand what is the exact savings that it could help you, and how can we model this throughout our region. What Hughes is anticipating is $1 million savings over 20 years. Is that correct, Chief Beatus? And when we're looking at that, that's about $50,000 a year that you can use for something else. And I think that becomes a really important area. And so I'm very interested in looking at this. From Athena Health, there was some questions brought up yesterday. And Jenny, you brought up some concerns regarding confidentiality. I want you to know that I believe that our electronic records is a lot safer than this right here. And so, you know, one of the things is that the number of sign-ons that are required, and the great thing about the Athena Health record is that each area, every time it's touched, it's auditable. And so I think that becomes a really important factor as we move forward. Staffing is really great. As we're looking at the hiring process, I just want you to know this, is that if we look at from the top steps, Once we open a position, and that's step 3, we have to have it open for 10 days. From the time we open the position till we start selecting applicants for interview, that can take up to 5 weeks, depending on where it is, and that's an area of much concern. And a lot of people are saying it's because of our criminal background. That's not necessarily the case. Once other things happen, we have the hiring manager prepares documentation for it. Once the interviews have happened, we have the documentation, and that moves forward, and that takes about a week, and then we have the following steps. And so you can see all the steps it takes to move forward. So when we look at the total and the average of 13 weeks to bring somebody on, here's the thing, is that with dual positions, if we work better together, we could really improve that. And if we're really committed, we could do it in 6 weeks. This is the final thing I want to say about this, and we can do better here. I got that, and that's a business practice that we're looking at. When we know that the criminal background application is filled out correctly, and there's nothing there that we have to worry about as far as that needs to go to an adjudicator, it could be done in 2 days. We've had turnaround in 2 days on the criminal background when all things are done good. When things have to go to the adjudicator because of a criminal background, that's where it starts becoming more complicated. And as people have more engagement in a lot of different states, it becomes even more challenging. If the paperwork's if it isn't filled out right, then that slows down the process. There's some other factors that take place in this, but the bottom line is that we looked at the application process and at the criminal background application, and we've been able to reduce both of those by maximizing this. Another big concern is references here when we're trying to check references, and that's a big issue. That in itself can take some delays, and so I just wanted to share with you that our native, and when we're looking at our native hire rate, this is significant when I'm looking at 200 and I'm going with over the last year, we hired 237 new positions or transitioned them. 72 of them were Alaska Native, or Native. Here's the breakout of our positions, our employees of the year, our partnerships. We talked a lot about the partnerships, and I just want you to know that we're all about partners, and it's important for us to partner with one another and each other, and it strengthens us. We have a coalition of 5 communities. I think it's Clinton and Haida, it's Chigachmute, Kawarik, and Manilik, along with TCC, that consist of 100 tribes. So when we go in and meet with our legislators, we're going in with this type of power, and I think that's really beneficial. Now, one of our strongest relationships that I think that we have is with the Tlingit Haida and with Richard, and he's a strong advocate. In fact, tomorrow he's going to be meeting talking about the VPSO program, and we can't be there, so he's doing it, and we usually partner really well with him. He has a strong tribal voice. I want to tell you about a couple of changes and a couple of things that we needed to do because the regulations that have been adapted. We've incorporated a new compliance division, and we also have a corporate quality management program wanting to make sure that it has 3 roles, that quality assurance is throughout the organization, not just health. 2, that it incorporates Chugwitsin in our guiding principle, and 3, that it helps infuse the, make sure that we're incorporating the Baldrige framework that was authorized. Now, compliance is really important, and this is our health information management system. Right underneath that, that's been moved under compliance, and that's a very important piece as we look at confidentiality and how we protect our records for our clientele. And then safety and security. Now, for health services, we've been looking at how do we improve our communications between our services as rural and Chief Andrew Isaac, and there's been some breaks in communication there. We want to improve it, so we're looking at a best practice model of incorporating an executive medical officer, a Chief Andrew Isaac medical director, and the rural, and how they work together to communicate and coordinate services better. And then we're going to be looking at the rural clinical operations director. This is important to ensure that we provide a higher level of care at TCC. We already talked about this. Automation. Anybody know what this is? We still have them. And I think there's people that are now around that have never used a typewriter. But we're still doing it. And so we're trying to get rid of that thing. Okay, excellent services. I want to show a quick video here, and then I think we'll move on, and I'm going to start wrapping up if we can. And this is my grandma's house.
And I had a dream. I found an old Alaska commercial map, the yellow map with the red pins on them, where their stores were. And that night I had a dream that we had a grandma's house in each of our villages, and there was a little grandma's house pin on that map, that when the kids didn't have a good home and when things were rough, that they just had a place, a safe place to go.
People say it takes a village to raise a child, but it also takes a village to destroy a child. I used to babysit a little girl who was 4 years old, and she already knows what drinking is. When I would babysit her while her mom would drink, she would beg her mom, please don't drink and please don't go out. This has broken my heart because the little girl is going through the same pain as I did.
When the children who watch their parents drink, they are going to most likely inherit the addiction when they get older. They are going to continue to cycle out the addiction, and it won't stop until we stand up and speak up.
They celebrate like having basketball games, potlatches, and other things like that. Why can't we celebrate us? We need to make a change. We need to stand up for our young people.
Still to this day, I'm still healing from that.
We address suicide when it's too late. We don't address the problems that lead to suicide. I don't even want the name anymore. We need health and wellness. We need to address the issues that the end product is suicide. It's too late. We need to address alcohol, drugs, gambling, molesting, child alienation. All of those abuses that these children cry about, we need to address, because suicide is the last checkout box. It's too late. We can arm the children with knowledge and educate them as much as we can to prevent that last checkout box.
you can't say enough about Cynthia Erickson and the commitment she has to our youth. The nonprofit My Grandma's House partnered with TCC Division of Wellness and Prevention to start the healing journey for our communities. Youth across the state joined to speak on their experience on trauma and recovery. But once again, our kids are asking for more involvement, and they're asking for us to celebrate them. And I think that's an important message and something that we might not do as good as that we used to. And so something we can work back. You know what I'm going to do? I can continue with my report, but we've gone over a lot of information, so I'm going to slow it down. But when I look at the legacy that started back in 1915, when the chiefs from our region stood together in the face of adversity, and that's what we have in front of us now, adversity. Tanana chiefs, along with you, will work together and will overcome. We always have, we always will. But it takes a true partnership. It takes the unity of everybody working collectively together. And so we go back to our vision, healthy, strong, unified tribes. With that, I'll close and I'll accept any questions if necessary. Thank you.